Good evening, everyone. This is Climate Change by the Elements podcast with Carol Bluestein and Thaddeus Howze. We are talking about climate change. One of the things that we wanted to do with this particular podcast was to make climate change more palatable. No, I don't mean that we can eat it or do better by it, but what I mean by that is to make climate change less awe-inspiring, because one of the reasons we think people don't want to talk about climate change or don't want to be involved with climate change is because it is such a huge, monumental, world-shattering problem. And as such, when humans are confronted by problems like that, we just run away. We're not even made for that. You know, as I've been doing a little reading, one of the things I've realized about human beings and problems is we are made to solve problems that have a degree of immediacy. So, for example, if you were in the Serengeti somewhere, minding your business, you see some grass moving, you might go, that could just be the wind, or it could be a lioness deciding that looked really tasty. You immediately have several responses that you'll take. You'll either defend yourself because you know it's a lion, or you'll run away, or you'll die valiantly saving your friends and family, because that's kind of what we did back then. That's how we are. We're immediately driven to fight or flight. That's our natural instinct. But one of the things about climate change is that it's not like that. It's not an immediate thing. It's not like a brush fire or a volcano exploding. It's much more subtle. It's so subtle that you don't even realize it's happening. And climate change is taking place all around you. It's in the air that you breathe, full of new chemicals and things that volcanoes used to throw off some of these things like sulfurous dioxide. These are things that our atmosphere naturally produced, but not in the quantities that we produce today. We have the option to look at our water supplies and say, well, water is, we have so much water on Earth, there's no way we can poison it all. And the answer is you don't have to poison it all, you just have to poison enough. That is the nature of our problem, that these are such subtle things, that the threat is so quiet and easy to miss, that by the time we're aware of it, it might already be way too late, as we are discovering now. The IPCC released a document last week, or now 3 weeks ago now, saying that if humanity didn't get its act together, climate change and global warming in particular will eventually reach a point where it can no longer be stopped. That it will reach something called a runaway greenhouse effect, where it will only get warmer, it will never get cooler, and not in our lifetimes or in any lifetimes to come for quite a while. So that's the threat that we're trying to put off. So the reason we get together today now is to talk about climate change by the elements. We broke it down into smaller pieces. So we said we would do like the classic alchemists and talk about air, earth, fire, and water. And we broke climate change into these smaller pieces so that we could just talk about a little piece of it at a time, so that we don't awe you into the point where you cannot understand it or deal with it or bear with it, and instead give you the opportunity to learn about a segment of climate change and maybe what you can do as an individual, as either a writer of the Good Men Project or just an individual who is concerned about this, to do your part to understand and to help make the world a better place by talking about it in your communities, by changing how you live, by addressing the human element that makes climate change possible and at the point we're going, apparently irrevocable. Carol, I'll let you warm us up with something interesting.
I don't know. I thought that was pretty powerful.
Start a fire, Carol.
Well, fire, which we're talking about tonight, was the thing that set us apart from animals. Once humans got fire, we started to take control of our environment. And since that time, we've pretty much been abusing it one way or another. Sorry. When we talk about fire in terms of energy and combustion, We also know that the hotter the fire, the more material is, there's less pollution. So really hot fires tend to be, leave less residue. But it's also more expensive. So people don't necessarily try to burn everything to the point where there's no residue. And what's left goes into the air and into our lungs and into our water and then into our rivers. Everything is interconnected. But it starts with the human need for energy.
I can take it from there if you want to rest for a second.
I was letting my dogs in and out of the house.
Oh, okay. I thought you were pausing.
Do you want me to go to the transportation of energy and to talk about?
Not yet, because I want to do something before that, because I know you want to do your pipeline thing. So let me talk a little bit about it.
No, I just like the pipeline thing. But go ahead.
I know you do. All right.
Okay,
so energy.
That's the Thaddeus.
When we're talking about fire, we're talking about energy. Now, just like Carol said, there are really only two periods of human history. There is BF, before fire, like 2 million years, where we ran around in the dark, and we were part of the natural order of things. We were a snack food that was slow, and fortunately, there were lots of us, so we managed to survive the period of BF. But once we acquired fire, AF, and we didn't make fire the first time. More than likely, a lightning bolt struck a tree, set it on fire, and then we said, ooh, it's warm, and it's nice, and I like this. And so we stayed near it, and we carried it with us. And there are cultures that have, to this day, that will carry a smoking ember in a small clay pot, and that's how they carry their fire around. So fire really changed our relationship to nature. It made us the apex predator on Earth. We changed how we thought. We changed how we moved. We ate cooked meat. It made our brains grow larger. We did more. We were more. We were incredible because of fire. Never mistake that fire is not a good thing. Without it, we cease to exist. And this is the inherent flaw in energy today. Our civilization, as we understand it, is 100% dependent on energy. Name something that doesn't use energy that is still useful to us as a civilization. And I only know one thing. I only know one thing that we can do well without energy. Anybody know what
you mean without fire or human
without
intervention?
Fire or without chemical energy, without the release of chemical energy, meaning either by burning something, burning oil, burning fuel, or nuclear power. If all power vanished tomorrow, what is the only thing humanity can do without it? Anybody know what that is?
We can walk. We can walk a lot.
We can walk a lot, that's true. What else? But I'm hoping for something a little more useful.
Farming?
Farming, we can
do,
yes.
Put seeds in the ground. Yep.
Yes, we can put seeds in the ground. So, yes, we can farm. The only other useful thing we can do is read. Reading is still viable. It is still one of the most powerful technologies at our command that doesn't require the actual use of burning anything. But that's about it. That's the hazard of our modern world. Say again?
Mm-hmm. You need light.
Oh, no, you've got the sun for that. You got the sun and the moon. We can always read. We've got the sun and the moon. We can go back to doing it the old-fashioned way, huddling around in the dark, hoping nothing's going to eat us. Yes, we've always got that. So,
well, I'm just going to be devil's advocate here, though, but making a book does require energy.
Nope. No, it doesn't. We made books before we had fire. We have the potential to make books even without fire. So you don't need fire to make books. It's nice. It's a nice tool, but it isn't a requirement.
So there are crafts.
That's what I mean.
The ancient crafts.
All the ancient crafts. But those ancient crafts of potteries and basket making and clay pots, or some clay pots that can be dried in the sun, these things will not take us to the moon. They will not drive us across town at 80 miles an hour. They will not move our ships. They will not move our goods. We are completely dependent on the release of combustible energy made from the bones and flesh of dead things, long dead, millions of years dead. Without them, we have nothing. Ironic that our society that is filled with light and energy is completely dependent upon the dead creatures that have passed away millions of years ago. And matter of fact, some of those dead things died and became extinct. They died all at once through mass extinction, and we benefited from their deaths. Just so you have an understanding that our civilization is built upon previous mass extinctions happening again and again and again. There have been 4 or 5 major mass extinctions on Earth where almost all life on Earth ceased to exist. What we use for oil today, what we use for natural gas today, is those animals expiring, their raw remains being compressed and turned into an organic soup we use for oil and coal and natural gas. These 3 things lift us up and carry us as a civilization. Problem with that uplift is the price tag. The longer we use them, the more we pollute our environment. Right now, about 1/3 of all power plants in the United States use coal, still use coal. These are the most dirty. These are the most toxic. These are the least effective power plants in America. And despite the politics of quote-unquote clean coal, there is no such thing as clean coal. Just let's keep it real. Let's be scientific. Let's speak truth to power. All coal is dirty, because it's filled with lots of chemicals and processes and things that were mixed in with that material. And when you burn them to release them, coal produces some of the most toxic byproducts on Earth. This is the legacy of coal. And one of the reasons we are doing our best as a nation, hopefully, to close, at least before Donald Trump became president, we were doing our best as possible to close down the 1,400 or so coal-based power plants that are still working in the United States, most of them along the east, along the Appalachians, along the East Coast. There aren't too many out here anymore, but there used to be on the West Coast where I live. So we are looking at closing those, or we were looking at closing those. But the industry of coal, moving coal, it's big. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of vehicles. It takes a lot of manpower, and thus it employs a lot of people. And this is why we have a hard time getting rid of coal. It is an employer. It is a major employer. And as a result, we are reluctant to reduce our dependency upon it. Okay, Carol, now you can do your story.
I was just thinking of the coal and in addition to the coal ash, which is toxic, and being put into landfills and being dumped into our waterways. Coal, the mining of coal has a history of big conglomerates coming to very poor economic areas, employing people for a short period of time, using company resources for food and housing, and then the profits of the coal are taken out of state or out of the area, creating ruined landscapes and very poor communities that had the promise of wealth and then lost it. So it's a very vicious cycle, this coal business. So the other thing that we mine is, and we dig for, is oil. And one of the Standard Oil was one of the biggest companies originally in the United States, and that was run by the Rockefellers. John Rockefeller Sr. And when they found oil in the Midwest, Texas, wherever, I don't remember where the first wells were, he used the railroad, which was run by Andrew Carnegie, to move the oil from the fields to the processing plants in, I want to say the Pittsburgh area, but I could be wrong on that. And he paid a fee, and Carnegie moved the oil until Carnegie realized that he now had Rockefeller over a barrel and could ask for more money per barrel, as it were. And Rockefeller got really angry that he was being squeezed. So he's the one that came up with the idea of bringing the oil directly from the field to the processing plant through pipelines. So he started the pipelines to get even, with Carnegie, so he wouldn't have to use the railroad. And from that first pipeline, we now have pipelines under a great deal. Where would you say it's centered? I would say it's centered in the middle of the country. Pipelines everywhere, but they reach to the. Go ahead.
They go from coast to coast, and the core of America's pipelines are underneath Texas. They run up to Canada. They run pretty much in every direction, and there's 160,000 miles of pipeline that's just for oil. There's another million or so for natural gas. So we're talking huge pipelines that span the entire nation, and they move natural gas, primarily natural gas, but they still move a lot of oil. Oil pipelines are inherently dangerous.
Yes, and they're very hard to maintain because guess what? They're underground. And when they burst, the oil finds its way to the surface and pollutes farmland and waterways.
And aquifers.
And aquifers.
Not forget aquifers. We talked about how important those were in water. So, yeah, when a pipeline breaks and it leaches into an aquifer, all of that water that used to be available for drinking is now no longer able to be used in any way, shape, or form.
Which also happens with the fracking for natural gas. They put chemicals into the ground, and the chemicals seep into the water, and the water becomes
in some cases, it becomes flammable. If you live in some parts of the Midwest, hydraulic fracturing or fracking is a process by which they pump chemicals into the ground. They squeeze the natural gas back up into their pipes, and they abscond with that natural gas. But the water that they pump down is not just water. It's water that's been treated with a bunch of chemicals, and when that fracturing chemical sometimes sinks lower into the aquifer, it can poison the water. And what we have seen is that people who live in those areas, some people can actually set their water on fire. It is a terrible thing to see, and because those people are relying on water that's found underground, they are basically held hostage to those corporations because now they have no water, and the infrastructure in those areas is not robust enough for people to get water from other sources. So this is one of those things we were talking about when we talk about water and our vulnerability to large corporations who have the power to manipulate our environment without any real concern for the people who are manipulated and affected by it. So, for example, hydraulic fracturing. We've learned that fracturing will cause earthquakes. In some areas, places that didn't previously have them now have hundreds in any given month, and this has not changed, and it's because of the instability of pumping water into these fractures that cause their own little mini faults that now disturb those areas. So when we talk about fire, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just add something to that? So we are endangering our aquifers and our land and our resources with this gluttony of energy, looking for oil and gas, taking them out, and fueling our manufacturing and our cars and everything else. And the reason that it's so important is that companies are afraid if they don't get that resource out of the ground as quickly as possible, that their profits and their bottom line, which counts on the oil assets, will become a negative instead of a positive, because they won't be able to get at it. I mean, they'll always be able to get at it, but they won't be able to use it because they'll be in an electric and clean energy phase. So right now, the big push in this country and in Russia is to get the oil and the gas out and use it and prevent any environmental cautions on it, because if we don't use it now, they may lose a great deal of money. That's called the carbon bubble, but it explains why companies are frantically relying on oil and gas while they can. Okay, go.
It's not relying, it's monopolizing. So here's the catch. Right now in America, I don't know about the rest of the world, but in America, we only use about 14% of our energy requirements are renewable. And as Carol pointed out, it is not an accident. Matter of fact, it's quite intentional. We could have significantly more. Now, I did include, and those of you who are able to go to the Goodman Project environmental site, you will find I included a list or a place that lists all of the kinds of energy that America is commonly using, how much of it we use, where it's produced, and about how much of that energy is available. And each type of energy has its own pluses and minuses, and why we want to use them. One of the great pluses of most renewable energies is that they don't produce a carbon footprint. They don't utilize carbon materials. However, the creation of the materials it takes to create those devices does use energy. So this is ironically the oxymoronic aspect of renewable energy. Renewable energy requires manufacturing, and manufacturing requires fossil fuels. So the irony of all of these big companies' greed is that the more energy they take and put to use to basically acquire fossil fuels and continue to use them without thinking about that, by not evolving our technology, we are basically building into our society a timeline, a timetable of self-destruction. Many of the renewable technologies require the energy of fossil fuels. But rather than controlling those fossil fuels and saving them for a rainy day or utilizing them the most effective that they can do and building an infrastructure of renewable energy, we are instead burning those fuels randomly, capriciously, without thinking about it, because we want to profit, or they want to profit, because I'm not getting any money. I don't know about you. They want to profit on how they can create or gather this energy, this non-renewable energy, and use it up and make money, without actually thinking about the fact that without this energy, there is no infrastructure to maintain our society. See, this is the catch. Our society is 100% dependent on fossil fuels right now. That little 14% that we get, that's not enough to run anything. Del Monte might be able to run its little power plants or its little factories out of it, but our computer companies, they won't be able to do it. Our mining facilities, they won't be able to do it. We need fossil fuels. We don't have to like it. We don't have to talk about it. It is an unfortunate truth, but we should be taking those fossil fuels and turning them into renewable energy sources, and we are not. We're burning them. And as a result, there's going to come a day when we will no longer have sufficient fossil fuels to create renewable energy. And that time is coming, because so far all of the biogas and all the other technologies that we're trying to create, I believe our biogas industry is about 2% of all the energy produced in the U.S. So when we run out of fossil fuels, when we run out of the easily attainable fossil fuels, the oil wells and the gas mains and all those places that we've been using that kind of energy, when that runs out, we will no longer be able to generate energy at a level sufficient to create the technologies that the future will need. So if anything, what we are seeing now is basically short-sighted greed that could basically undermine our civilization. And I don't think anybody's really talking about that in any way, shape, or form. All right, so now it's 5:30, and because this is energy, and energy is really big and really scary, and everybody here has some familiarity with energy, I want to hear a few questions from you before we talk about anything else. How do you feel about energy? What are your viewpoints? What do you think of what we've told you thus far?
Hi, it's LaDonna.
Hello,
and
LaDonna.
I think that we're going to be able to answer that question about what were they thinking on Easter Island when they chopped down the last tree. We're well
I
on
love
our
that story.
well on our way.
Yeah, for those of you who weren't here for water, Lisa recounted the tale of Easter Island, where all the natives of the former Easter Islands were happily cruising along doing their thing until one day their civilization came to an abrupt halt when the last tree on Easter Island got cut down, and then there were no more birds, and then there were no more boats, and then there were no more fishermen nets, and soon there were no more people, and then they ate each other, and that was the end. And so it was a terrible, terrible story of Easter Island, because it is really looking a lot like our own story. We are cruising right toward Easter Island's, the fate of Easter Island. We are not planning for the future. At this point, Donald Trump has decided that coal is the way to go, and coal is not. We already know this. I talk about coal ash today in one of the essays that I've collected for you guys. Coal ash is the byproduct of burning coal, and when you're done, even if you burn it hot, even if you burn it right, even if you do the best that you can do with it, it's still there. So if you've ever had a barbecue, anybody here make a barbecue, at the end of your barbecue, those hunks of coal turn into this fine gray, not so pleasant ash that is, it's not a big deal to get rid of. You got a trash can, you throw it in there. But what if you've got a few million tons of coal ash, and the coal ash has lots of lead and arsenic and other heavy metals that are extremely toxic and in some cases radioactive. So what do you do with a toxic, chemically laden, radioactive mess that you can't breathe, because if you breathe it, it causes issues in your lungs. You can't put water on it to keep it down because then it leaches into the water table. And you don't want to just throw it anywhere because it's deadly. What do you do with it? It becomes part of a landfill. But we make millions and millions of tons of coal ash every year. Hundreds of millions, not just millions, hundreds of millions. I included a map so you could see every spot where a coal ash is being stored and or buried in the United States today, and there are thousands of them. Matter of fact, once you see this map, you'll probably do like I do, and you'll just swoon for a moment, because this map gives you information about when the last time they had a coal ash spill and what are the side effects of coal ash, and those side effects are many. In addition to being radioactive, toxic, and dangerous, you can't breathe it, you can't hide it, you can't get rid of it. We even tried to turn it into a building material unsuccessfully. So just to show you, we are doing everything in our power to get rid of this stuff that there is more of every day, because our society is demanding more and more energy. And we are refusing to address the elephant in the room. We need more power, but we need less pollution. And we refuse to build nuclear power plants because anybody know why we don't make nuclear power plants? I'm curious. What's the official? There we go. That's the real reason we don't make nuclear power plants, because we're afraid of them. I, however, discovered, I knew this, but I discovered it again today, that the only kind of power that's ever been better than coal-powered plants in terms of its off-putting chemical byproducts and danger to the environment is nuclear power. Nuclear power is safer than every other kind of power, even with the leftover radioactivity. Even though there's leftover radioactive material, those are terrible things, and we have to bury them someplace for 10,000 years, and we can mark those places off and hopefully find a way to keep people from going there later. But that is still a better power than anything else because it doesn't produce carbon dioxide, which is our number one greenhouse gas, and power factories are the number one producers of carbon dioxide, even more so than cars. Now, you know how many cars we talked about, right? We talked about 1.6 billion cars last time. Power plants on Earth outperform cars by a factor of 4, just to show you just how dirty power plants are, by a factor of 4. On all the cars on the entire planet, if you collected every power plant, you could have 4 times as many cars and still not equal what power plants are producing in terms of toxic byproducts. They produce carbon dioxide, they produce nitrous oxide, they produce all kinds of sulfur dioxide that go into the atmosphere, they become acid rain, they poison our crops, they poison our waterways, they poison our fish. Coal power plants need to be cooled, so they take water from the rivers and they flush this water back into the rivers, and then that water kills fish and poisons things and creates dead zones. So we're talking about catastrophic environmental effects that we have because we use power every day, all the time, and we want power all the time, and because a group of people want to be rich, they refuse to adapt cleaner, safer energies, like nuclear power.
And what about solar and wind energy?
Solar and wind energy amount to, I think, let me get the actual graph, because I can tell you exactly how much they account for, which is less than their whole renewable energy in toto is 14% of all the energy we use in the United States, just to show you how little it is. I think it's like 2% for solar, and I think 3% for like water. So we're still talking fragments of energy. And one of the problems with them is that they're environmentally dependent. They're difficult to push electricity from a solar. Remember, okay, so here's the catch. Whenever you want to generate power, one of the first things you have to remember about power is when you generate it, no matter how well you generate it, no matter how well you use it, some power gets lost while it's going to the homes. It's lost in transformers, so when it comes out of a power plant, it's incredibly large and high voltage, so it has to be reduced in voltage, which means it goes to a transformer or a group of transformers, and it gets reduced in power. And each time it gets reduced, there's loss. So the power that's generated is not the power that arrives. And as a result, a lot of the power that we create is never used. The further it has to be pushed, the less power arrives. So when you're looking at solar power and wind power, both fairly potent, they're both dependent on environmental conditions that change, and as a result, you cannot surge them. So in a big city, for example, big cities have what's called surge periods, where you need power to happen at certain times of the day. So for daytime, for example, buildings are open, they use electricity, they use power for everything. So as a result, during the day, power plants need to be producing more power, and that's okay for a solar plant. But at night, solar plant doesn't produce anything. It's night. So as a result, we cannot surge those powers. During the winter, when people need power to heat their homes, coal power plants just throw more coal on there and we're good to go. Of course, we produce coal side effects. This is one of the disadvantages of renewable energies. You have to have lots of different kinds. They have to be able to be mixed and matched, and they have to be able to complement each other as well as be able to be pushed through our current power system, which is ancient. Our power control grid is over almost 100 years old now. So we are struggling with dying infrastructure, challenging power supplies, and the constant need to build more stuff because more people live in more cities every day. Cities almost never get smaller. That means their needs continue to evolve, they continue to grow, and this puts a strain on every aspect of our power generation system. And rather than building... Say again?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. In order to be able to continue to develop new means of creating power, we should be building renewable power plants every day. Literally every day we need to be, one of them needs to go online. China's doing that. They're producing giant fields of solar cells every day. They're going to have a solar nation. That's their mission, to use solar power and wind power and every other kind of power they can, because they're recognizing what I have already told you. Fossil fuels are finite. China does not have enough of them, and they are completely dependent on nations that do, and they hate that. So they're going to fix that.
We also have to build storage, because we can create, well, there's battery storage, but I'm not an engineer. I'm just saying that if we can collect.
Battery power is great. One of the side effects of batteries, however, they talk about the things we talked about last week, which were conflict minerals. Lithium, gallium, all those metals that you use to make batteries, they are also in limited supplies or difficult to find supplies. So giant battery storage facilities, which are great in theory, are much more challenging to produce in fact. And one of the other side effects of batteries like those is that eventually they die. And when they die, they can't be renewed, and they are completely toxic when they're finished. So here's the other half of the renewable equation. Even if we can create it, we can't store it, because electricity is not like water. You can't just store it easily, and anything that you store it in will eventually die. So you have to struggle to find ways of producing it, storing it, moving it, relaying it, and then dealing with the toxic devices. If you make batteries, dealing with what's left of the batteries when they die. They eventually die. All batteries die. If you've used batteries in your home, you know that they die. And one day next week we'll talk about what happens to batteries when they die, because that is one of those things that is part of climate change, dealing with the side effects of how we live. And disposability of those kinds of things is part of that struggle. So, yeah, we'll talk about that again. So batteries are good. It's a good idea, but it's not enough. We're going to have to find another way. And that, of course, is part of that challenge. Any other questions? Comments, questions?
Yeah, I just have one other thing I wanted to point out about fire. So luxury brands, Burberry has come under fire, pun intended, lately. But Burberry, Nike, I forget, so many, Cartier, a bunch of real high-end luxury brands intentionally burn the products that they haven't sold in order to protect their brand and keep their price points really high. So if Burberry is selling a trench coat for $1,900, which is how much they sell it for, and they have 5,000 trench coats left over at the end of the season, they'll burn them rather than having them discounted to, say, a mere $300, God forbid, because then people won't look at Burberry as like the exclusive high-end brand.
Or give it to poor people.
What's that?
Or give it to people with no clothes.
No, but then poor people will be wearing high-end.
I understand.
I mean, that's the whole point. I know you're being sarcastic, but that is. But I don't think people really understand this, and that's why I just want to be clear.
Oh, go ahead.
It's like poor people wearing high-end luxury brands completely defeats the purpose, because you want people to feel as if it's so exclusive that only the rich people can wear it, only the people in that club, only the people who are the success can wear that. So this is part of our success myth, right? It's part of the thing that fuels the stereotypes. Men have to make a lot of money so they can buy the high-end Burberry trench coats, and they can pay full price for them, and if not, we'll burn those suckers. I mean, the whole story is ridiculous, right?
The word you're looking for is psychosis.
Let me just finish this one thing now. So I don't want, it seems like we should laugh at it because it's so ridiculous. But this is a reality. They are using fuel to make those coats, and then they are burning them and causing pollutants to go into the air from the burning of it. They are polluting the air by burning it after they've already depleted our natural resources by making them. Like, this is a big thing. They burn hundreds of millions of dollars worth of merchandise. And so Burberry just actually said they would stop burning it because there was such incredible backlash to them. So I'm bringing it up here because it's the kind of thing that you can very easily take action on and be activist about. Like, if you see other people talking about this, that's what they're talking about. And it's worth putting the pressure on these companies, because if they get enough pressure, they will stop. So it's like actually an action that works. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a valid argument, because it isn't just air. Remember, we talked about water? Remember, every form of clothing uses a fantastic amount of water. So they're not just burning chemical resources to create them. They're destroying water. They're wasting. They're producing pollutants in their production process. So there's a huge amount of waste basically being generated for vanity's sake. If you really want to impress me, Burberry, if you want to tell people, wow, our coats are really unique, then what you tell people is, wait 3 weeks and we will produce a coat custom fit to you, tailor-made for you. This way you can say there's a reason why your coats cost, $1,900, and that you didn't just burn up 5,000 of them because you couldn't sell them. That is wasteful. That is extravagant. That is contemptuous. That is the kind of thing that basically says we have no value. We don't understand the value of what we produce. We don't understand the cost we're paid to society. We don't care about what it does to you or me. It is more important that we make money. It is a prime example of the thing we've been talking about. Short-sighted people placing money above the environment, above their health, above good sense. It is just unbelievable.
Yeah, and if you look at like how we broke up climate change, like air, water, earth, and fire, you're pretty much destroying all of those with the clothing manufacturing process, right? You're polluting
Absolutely.
the air, you're using water, some are ending up in landfills and destroying the earth, and some are burnt causing fire. I mean, like, you've got the spectrum covered.
Right. These are people who have no respect for nature or us or even themselves, ultimately, because let's face it, you can't eat money. You can't breathe money. You can't drink money. So basically, when you're making money through this process, what you're saying is, I value the environment that sustains me less than the money that I make from it. That's a psychosis. That's sickness. That's something that people need help with. As a culture, as a society, we need to begin to address this. And one of the best ways, of course, is to boycott Burberry or whatever they call themselves, because burning things that you made so that they continue to have a higher value is less environmentally sound to me than doing a print on demand. That's how artisans used to work. The old world artisans, once upon a time, what they did was their value was in homemade, slow-made, handcrafted. And we still have people who do that, by the way, that they make things by hand. And making things by hand, making them slower, taking more time, means that those things probably have a much lower cost of environmental damage, because you're not producing 1 million of them a year. That's the real benefit of doing handcrafted things. So maybe Burberry needs to go backward in time and say, hey, we'll produce these for you by hand. And this way, when it costs $1,900 for it, we didn't destroy, a huge portion of the earth with the externality of how we choose to maintain our business model.
Actually, if they produced less and made it rarer, then they would also reduce waste. So it would be worth $1,900 because because you can't get them, and they wouldn't have to burn 5,000.
Well, that's just somebody who's not paying attention. That is a cultural blindness, because nobody should have to burn anything to maintain a business model. If you're destroying stuff that you made, you're not maintaining a business model. You're just an extravagant wastrel. That's the real conversation being made there. Wow.
Yeah, because you're right, Carol. I mean, they keep, like these days, you can. I'm sure it wouldn't cost that much to just run out of it, be out of stock for a while, make a few more, and send them out.
But a lot of people are doing that now. Print on demand is real. It's one of the ways the book industry has managed to save itself. Rather than making books and then destroying them when they don't sell them, they now only print books when someone asks for them, and which to me makes perfectly good sense. Why make something I'm going to destroy because I don't want to, have to worry about it showing up on the black market? So fine, don't make it. It can't show up on the black market if it doesn't exist. This is not rocket science, but we already know that fighting greed is probably the number one thing that causes climate change. The fact that greed, the motivation to make something that you either can't get easily or can't live without, because that's basically why the energy companies can do what they're doing, is that we can't live without energy, and they know it. You need natural gas to heat your home and cook your food. You need electricity to do just about everything. So they know this. They have you over a barrel, and they're not going to build any form of energy management or energy creation that they can't control and make a profit from. And let's face it, if we made solar cells everywhere, companies would say, well, we have some companies that believe, some politicians believe that solar cells drain the sun of its energy. But aside from, don't laugh, he really believes this. I won't even mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him any more than he's already embarrassed himself. But there are politicians who believe that solar technology drains the sun. And it's like, no, the sun is the source of all of the energy that's ever existed on Earth. No matter where it comes from, it all comes from the sun. So what we need to do is to figure out how to skip the middleman, skip the million years of compression and heating and making of oil, and drain it right from, directly get it from the source. There's more solar energy in every second of the sun than humanity has ever had, ever will have, or ever will make. We just need to capture a tiny piece of it and make it ours. Any questions before we go?
Well, this is Charles, and I just have a question because, looking at, of course, greed and, all of that stuff, and American capitalism, thrives on where to get the most money. But what companies are getting it right? So it's like we've talked about the companies are getting it wrong, like going to coal. Going back to coal, going back to what can make the biggest money in the shortest time frame. But as far as looking at the companies that are really focused on innovation or focused on zero carbon footprint or all renewable, that would be considered this is where the future of energy is. How do you find out what companies those are so you could actually invest in them or help them or spread the word or something like that?
Honestly, I would have to do more of an assessment to figure out who those companies are that are getting it right. Some are learning. I know that there are some companies that, for example, any company that produces renewable energy is already on the right track. They recognize that it is an unsustainable market. The problem is that in America, the companies that get subsidies are currently oil companies. So if you're creating renewable technology, for example, you don't get subsidies. And as a result, oil is still cheaper to produce, make, buy, and sell than renewable energy. So any company that produces renewable technologies, of course, is getting it right. There are companies that are working, matter of fact, most computer companies are slowly getting to the idea of using less water to produce their devices, refining that water, using that water again rather than letting it escape. So there are slow transformations in these industries that are figuring it out. And probably what I'll do is I'll sit down and start looking through and seeing what companies are known for making more comprehensive transformations in their business model. Because some companies are getting it right. They are making the change, but it's not fast enough. And for it to have a real effect, we need to all be doing it. soon.
Right.
And we
so,
also
like,
have, let me just add to that we also have traditional power companies that are through either legislation or through pricing are not letting the renewables take hold in their community. So we need to fight it on a number of levels. But go ahead.
Oh, and that's a good point, because I'm in Florida, so of course we just have what's available to us unless we install our own solar panels, or whatever. There's no other option other than going to Florida Power and Light or something. But that comes back to like what we probably started out talking about is like the states that are putting the restrictions, because a company in itself probably most likely won't do something to improve, because that's not where the money is, but they will improve if they're required to by state laws, by federal laws, and of course with the current administration rolling back all the EPA and so forth, well, that takes away the requirement. But probably states like California would be at the forefront of that, of getting it right, and so forth as well. Yeah, that's interesting. It'd be interesting to have a grade of companies that are actually focused on the greenest energy, or focused on
I think there might be an app.
There might already be one of those.
Download that does that. I know a bunch of friends and I had thought about creating an app like a few years ago, but I think that there might be some. So you just check, like, what is their grade, especially before you buy something big, Like, it would be nice to know which refrigerator manufacturers were the most energy efficient ones, which were the most green. Like it seems like there should be an easy way to get that information. So if anyone on this call finds out about any app or technology or websites that do grading systems, like easy to find out grades for brands, please post it in the Facebook group. I think that's a great idea.
And going forward,
there are some. There are ways to check. I just saw a bunch of things just now talking about how a company determines how green it is. So it can be done.
Yeah. So going forward from our review of the 4 elements, we're going to revisit each element and bring it down to things that are being done and things that we can do. So
things we want to do, things we want to see, politics, maybe things we can do to fight. Politics is real. We know that local politics can make a difference in how businesses do what they do. So if we can bring the fight to them and say, look, what you're doing is irresponsible, and we want you to do differently. If we can bring that to the fray, we may have a better chance at convincing companies to become green, because it's literally the only way they're going to do it, is if we force them to, through legislation, through proper beliefs, through better government, by hiring scientists to go to Congress and live there and become Congress members like a few have done today or yesterday. So these are the ways we make those changes. We promote those candidates who believe that the future requires us to make an effort that is more green than it's currently been, and that it has to become a lifestyle choice, not just something we do because it's inconvenient or we want to feel good about ourselves. No, we need to make it become something that must get done by everyone, with the understanding that we aren't, it's not about just making money. It's about saving the future. Because the future matters. Even if you're not going to live in it, it still matters. And we need to start treating it like that. The future of people, yes, because remember, the planet will live without us. We already know all that. Planet will live on without us. 6 extinction-level events have occurred. A comet crashed into the Earth, killing 99% of all life on Earth. And yet the Earth is still here, and life came back. So we won't be here, but the Earth can survive without us. So we're not saving the Earth, we are saving ourselves. That's how we have to present it to people. It's not about saving the planet, it's about saving us. We need to figure out how to save ourselves by being smarter, working better, being more efficient, being more like nature. Nature wastes nothing. And that's where we need to be. We need to reach a point where no matter what we're doing, we are as good as nature. That nature saves, nature renews, nature restores, nature makes the old new again. We are not there yet, not even close.
But that's our model, to be a part of the natural order of things.
Indeed. Any last questions before we call a day, ladies and gentlemen? Any ideas you want to share?
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
And thank you for being here.
Oh, was that Lisa?
Thank you. Good talk.
One more time. Lisa?
Oh, yeah? Hello?
You were saying something.
Oh, no, I was just saying I thought it was great, and I'm already posting some things in the group that relate to what we talked about. So, yeah, let's keep going. Thank you.
All right, then we're going to go back to where we began with, where did we start, Carol?
Water.
We started with water. So we're going to go back to water next week and talk about ways that we can bring water conservation ideas into the common frame of reference so that people will start to address water as the life-giving, absolutely necessary thing that we don't have enough of, we can never get enough of, and that we need to find new ways to acquire and protect our waterways. There were some technologies that I saw last week. This one guy has built a device that using solar cells creates condensation and traps water out of the air itself. It's great, but it's slow. And it's one more way we can do what we're trying to do, but it is hardly enough. We're going to have to still do better. So we're going to talk about water again next week. And if you have any questions, you have any ideas, bring a friend, bring some ideas, bring some new ways of looking at this. And everywhere you go, there you are. So there's no escaping climate change. No, really, that's one of those things that whenever someone says to me about climate change, well, I don't have to worry about climate change. No, brother, everywhere you go, there you are. Climate change is always with you. So we don't get to walk away from this. All we can do is make it better. So thank you for coming. We had a great night. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say the thing to take away is we can never walk away from it. You can't ignore it because it's going to kill us if we do.
So,
thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming. You guys have a great night. See you next week.
Thank you, Carol. Thaddeus, have a good evening.
Oh, hi, Maya. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.